Pikmin 4 was bad. It's been a year since release now, and I haven't felt the urge to go back and replay it at all. I've gone back to Tears of the Kingdom. I've been itching to go back to Super Mario Bros. Wonder again, but I haven't even really thought about Pikmin 4 since I finished it, and there's a good reason for that. The game is not very good, right? It was a disappointment. Now, I've said the game is good in the past, but that was in comparison to absolute slop like Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3. When it comes to like actually good Nintendo games, the stuff that like Pikmin 4 is actually competing against, it comes off as like a huge, massive disappointment, right? And I felt when Pikmin 4 first came out that most people were not willing to come out and admit that this game was disappointing, right? There were a lot of reasons for this. We waited a decade for this. There was the hype cycle, right? I imagine a lot of people didn't get through the game. And like, of course, like typical like fanboyism, right? People were not willing to address the very real problems with Pikmin 4, right? The casualized gameplay, the Pikmin 2 structure, right? The lackluster map design, the limited AI, right? Like Pikmin 4, the unnecessary reboot, like there is so much about Pikmin 4 that was just awful that it makes my expectations of the franchise like very low going forward. Like I can't imagine that a new Pikmin game would be in any kind of an improvement considering just how well this game sold, how popular it was, and just how nobody dared to address like the very real issues with this game day one, right? Like this was a time where people really needed to come out and address that this game was not Pikmin, right? This was a time when people needed to address that Nintendo made a very rare, once in a blue moon mistake, and nobody did that, right? I was the only person I feel like who actually came out regularly and was saying that like this game is a disappointment, it's bad, it's not very good, I'm disappointed in it, I'm not happy with this. I was the only person who was like acknowledging the problem with the game, I think. But everyone else just plugged their ears and just screamed about like, but it's Pikmin. You can't criticize Pikmin. We've waited a decade for this. Like there was no willingness to acknowledge that the game was not very good. And it's really interesting to say this because like I have never really seen this happen with a Nintendo community, right? Usually they do the exact opposite, where they do the thing where they like pretend the game is bad when it's actually like a 10 out of 10 masterpiece, right? That's what they usually do. But this is like the opposite, and I'm really curious as to like what the mindset behind it was. Right? Was it like secondaries? Was it people who like don't know anything about games? Like it kind of feels like it's like people just don't understand what makes games good is my honest genuine opinion about this. Like when I look at like just the rows and rows of people who like praise Pikmin 4 but hated on Tears of the Kingdom, right, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder, when you like look at that, when you really take it in, you really get this impression that like they're only praising Pikmin because like it's the cool trendy thing to do, not because they actually enjoy it, not because they understand it very well, not because they have an appreciation for like Pikmin 4's new mechanics and everything it does, right? They're worshiping it because like it's cool to worship it in the community. Like, oh yeah, that was another thing. Yeah, this year's equivalent is Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, right? Because I've seen a lot of very similar behavior in regard to that game, where people pretend like the original was a flawless masterpiece. It wasn't. People pretend like the remake had like a real visual upgrade and all these great changes to it. It doesn't. People like downplaying like the script changes and how it butchers certain characterizations and scenes, right? Like again, the Thousand Year Door remake was awful, right? again, it wasn't like a complete train wreck, but like there's no denying that that specific game was a massive step down from what we've been getting in the past, right? And again, I was the only one to talk about it. Like, how many people do you see, make YouTube videos saying things that like, Vivian is a fanboy, or they butchered this joke, or like they made this line cringe, or like the pacing is off, right? Like they could have added more content, right? Like again, the Thousand Year Door was like always like a very super overrated game. Like I've always like maintained that like I've had a lot of contempt for the audience for it, but like why exactly are people so unwilling to acknowledge that the game had problems, right? And again, like this is the issue. Like it feels like any of these like lesser known Nintendo franchises, like things that have a cult audience, like when you have that kind of audience, when you have people who like are obsessed with Pikmin or obsessed with like classic Paper Mario, like they just refuse to acknowledge that like there's any real problems with their games at all. Like, oh, you just don't understand it. No, no. I've always like said that like Pikmin games are too short. I've always said that they need more content. I've always said that they need to figure out like a hook and like improve on the core formula. Like I like the games, which is why I'm coming out and making these statements. Like with Pikmin 3, I kind of said the same thing. Is that like, yeah, in a lot of ways this is the best Pikmin game we've ever gotten. But at the same time, I kind of miss like what they had going on with the original, right? With what they were doing with like just how you were tossed into this strange alien world, and like you were given very little direction, and just I love the original. The original was a very special game to me. Even more so now that I'm older. Like I really have like this really deep attachment to the original. And like 4 is just such a deviation from what made like 1 and 3 so great. They looked at the worst Pikmin game 2 and then decided to like, oh, we're gonna make more of that. When in reality, like Pikmin 2 should be like thrown in with like the Legend of Zelda Wand of Gamelon and like Hotel Mario as just being like the absolute just bottom of the barrel, just trash, like absolute just abominable, just video. Like again, 4 is like better than 2 at the very least, right? It took what like it fixed like the core problems with 2 for sure, but like there is no denying that when I play a Pikmin game, I never ever want to go through caves. Like I remember saying this when like I first saw that trailer that like they showed all this cool stuff, all this expanded world design, all this cool stuff. I was like so excited, and then they showed a cave, and I felt like my excitement just like whittle away to nothing, like almost immediately. Like, oh no, they ruined it. Like where was my support? Where was my backup? Where were people like acknowledging this game wasn't good? It was very disappointing to see like the Nintendo community fail to rise up and talk about a very rare, very uncommon Nintendo L.